There was a man knocking on the door, and I didn't know what he was doing there. I was like, what could he want? And when he was asking me questions, he was kind of peeking inside, trying to see who was in there with me. And that started making me feel really uncomfortable. He put his hand in the way, slid it open, grabbed me, and took me to my brother's room. He started to rape me. I was trying to get away. I started kicking him. He was doing what he was doing to me. I started to cry. I was in pain. I was scared, and it was just the most horrific feeling I could have felt.
On June 6, 2003, 9-year-old Jeannette Tamayo arrived home from school in San Jose, California, to a horrifying scene. A stranger broke into her home, sexually assaulted her in her own house, beat her mother and brother, and then kidnapped her. Over the next 3 days, Jeannette was held captive, sexually assaulted, and threatened with death by her abductor, Enrique Sosa Alvarez. But through incredible courage and quick thinking, Jeannette managed to gain her captor's trust, eventually convincing him to let her go. This is a survival story that will make you admire a young girl's fortitude that has tricked her kidnapper to free her. Alright, so it was just a regular day when 9-year-old Jeannette Tamayo came home from school at about 4:20 in the afternoon. She noticed the screen door was open a bit when she got there. Jeannette thought maybe her mom came back from work early and didn't really think much of it at first. But when she walked into her room, she saw that her window was smashed and glass was all over the floor. That's when she knew something was definitely wrong. She tried to call her mom, but the phone line was cut. That scared her even more. Just then, she heard knocking. What Jeannette didn't know was that a man had parked in front of her house earlier, gone inside, and was the one who broke her window. Security cameras caught all of this. The man had been inside her house for about 25 minutes, and after he went back to his car, he actually sat there waiting. Another car even came by, stopped next to the man's car for a bit, and then took off. Now, when Jeannette went to check the door, she saw a stranger standing there, just looking inside. Even though she was really scared, she opened the door a little. The stranger had actually followed her inside her home about 90 seconds after she got there. Here she was, face to face with this man she didn't know, right at her doorstep. He started asking her questions, trying to find out who else was home.
There was a man knocking on the door, and I didn't know what he was doing there. I was like, what could he want? And when he was asking me questions, he was kind of peeking inside, trying to see who was in there with me. And that started making me feel really uncomfortable, and I started slowly closing the sliding door.
It was a really tense and frightening moment for her. As she attempted to close the door, the stranger shoved her and forced his way inside the house. He grabbed her and took her to one of the bedrooms in her house.
He kept grabbing me, but I couldn't do anything, and I was just scared. And as soon as he was doing what he was doing to me, I started to cry. I was in pain, I was scared, and it was just the most horrific feeling I could have felt.
He then raped her right in her house and in her brother's room. And when he was done with her, he then restrained her with handcuffs and tied her legs. He then carried her to the garage where his car was parked, ready to take her away. Just as the man was about to lift the garage door and escape with Jeannette, her mom, Rosalina, pulled up right in front of the garage. From her position in the back seat, Jeannette could see her mom's car. It was like a small sign of hope. At that very moment, Jeannette's brother Paul, who was 15, saw a chance to help. He crawled under the garage door, which was only open a few inches. He knew he had to do something to save his sister. Inside the garage, he found a screwdriver on a workbench. He grabbed it, thinking he could use it to stop the man. The intruder was strong, though. When he saw Paul, he quickly knocked the screwdriver out of his hand and started hitting him. It was a scary sight. Paul tried to fight back, but the man was too much for him. Helpless and still bound, Jeannette watched in horror as the man dragged her brother back into the house. Hearing noises from inside, Rosalia rushed in. She saw the man hitting her son and ran towards them, yelling loudly. She lunged at the attacker in a fierce attempt to protect her children. For a moment, she managed to pull the man away from Paul. With the attacker briefly distracted, Paul dashed into the kitchen. His mind was racing. He grabbed the first thing he saw that could be used as a weapon, a frying pan. Paul came back, swinging the frying pan, trying to defend his mom. But again, the intruder was quick. He grabbed the frying pan from Paul and started hitting Rosalia with it. She fell to the ground.
I remember hearing my mom screaming, and it went quiet. I couldn't hear much after that. And I see the man rush back into the garage and into the car. And when I seen blood on his face, I was like, "Did you kill them?" And he just started laughing, and I just started to cry. I was like, I didn't know if he had killed them. I didn't know, if they were there anymore, if he had killed them. And I was just thinking with the blood on his face that they were gone. My family was gone.
The man kept shouting, "You know what I want," but it wasn't clear what he was after. This day left the Tamayo family shaken but broken apart, as they faced such unimaginable terror in their own home. The Tamayo family was left shaken after a horrifying ordeal in their quiet San Jose neighborhood. Janette, only 9 years old, had been kidnapped right from her home. The aftermath was brutal. The attack left her mother, Rosalia, needing 36 stitches to mend her wounds, while her brother Paul suffered severe beatings. In a desperate bid for escape, the kidnapper drove recklessly, cutting through the neighbor's bushes. Despite her bound state, Janette managed to turn around in the car for a final glimpse of her home. That's when she saw her mother, Rosalia, bloodied but alive, chasing after the car in a frantic state. Behind Rosalia, Paul was limping toward some bystanders, waving his arms, shouting for anyone who could hear, "Call the police! Call the police!" Back at the house, as the police and paramedics arrived, chaos ensued. Rosalia, despite her injuries, resisted getting into the ambulance. She was determined to tell the detectives and police officers everything that happened, but her condition was deteriorating fast. Meanwhile, Paul, who was also injured, was quickly secured and placed on a stretcher. In the end, both had to be taken to the hospital against Rosalia's will for immediate treatment. With the main witnesses now at the hospital, the police had little to do. They knew Janette had been abducted and that the assailant had broken into their home, cut the phone lines, and violently attacked the family before taking Janette. However, beyond these terrifying acts, all they had was the crime scene to piece together what happened. One of the first and most disturbing clues the investigators found was the amount of blood in the garage. It painted a grim picture of the struggle that took place there.
Things that I did notice in the garage was a lot of blood. I knew at that point this was a very violent crime. You start thinking, are we going to bring her home alive?
As the community rallied around the Tamayo family, offering support and hoping for Janette's safe return, the police worked tirelessly, combing through every piece of evidence and following up on every lead. The neighborhood was in shock. They had never imagined such brutality could touch their lives. As the investigation continued, everyone hoped for a breakthrough that would bring Janette back home safely. Now, Detective Heather Randall took charge of this harrowing case in a peaceful San Jose neighborhood where young Janette had been kidnapped right from her home. Initially, Heather and her forensic team faced a puzzling scene with blood traces in the kitchen and garage. They collected samples and started to piece together what happened, hoping the blood might give them a clue. Heather also called in handlers and bloodhounds to track any scents that might lead them to Janette or her attacker. However, the search didn't advance much. The blood turned out not to be from Janette or the assailant, as neither had sustained injuries during the initial break-in. This complicated the investigation, but Heather didn't lose hope. She kept digging for more clues. As Heather and her team worked, they noticed a security camera on a neighbor's driveway. Reviewing the footage provided crucial insights. It showed that 25 minutes before Janette got home, her attacker had already broken into her house, smashing her bedroom window and rummaged through her belongings. After the break-in, the attacker didn't flee. Instead, he went back to his car to wait for Janette. When Janette arrived, The man followed her inside and knocked at the door. The footage then showed him assaulting her. This was a terrifying scene that lasted almost 30 minutes. Eventually, they moved toward the garage, which is where the situation escalated further. By the time Jeanette's mother, Rosalia, and her brother Paul reached the house, the situation had become desperate. The recording captured their voices clearly in the background, filled with panic and urgency as they screamed for help, shouting repeatedly, "Call the police! Call the police!" This evidence helped Heather establish a rough timeline of the events that unfolded that dreadful day. She now had a clearer picture of the sequence of events and the attacker's movements. With each piece of the puzzle, the team got closer to understanding the attacker's actions and, hopefully, tracking him down. So Detective Heather Randall focused on a crucial piece of evidence in the search for Jeanette: the footage capturing the attacker's car in view of a security camera. In California, to issue a statewide Amber Alert, law enforcement needs specific identifiers like a name, a license plate, or a phone number linked to the suspect. Heather felt the frustration deeply. She has the evidence right there. It was so close, yet she needs just a bit more clear video. That's because the footage wasn't clear enough to see a license plate number or anything else specific through which they could recognize that car. Without the clear identifiers needed for an Amber Alert, Heather took another route. She decided to engage with the media, hoping that public attention could help in lieu of the alert. She and her team worked tirelessly, organizing helicopters to fly over the area with loudspeakers announcing Jeanette's name. They held press conference after press conference, ensuring that every resident of San Jose kept Jeanette's disappearance in the forefront of their minds. Meanwhile, Jeanette was doing everything she could to keep track of her surroundings. She memorized every turn the car made, holding on to a glimmer of hope that she might find her way back if she got a chance to escape. After a short drive, the car stopped. The man drove into the garage of a large white house, then called Jeanette inside. He walked up the stairs to the second floor and unlocked a door to a very small room equipped with just a TV, a small window, a bed, and a bathroom. He threw her to the ground and again raped her. After each time he would rape her, he would handcuff her wrist to the shower head, turn on the water, and leave her there for a while.
I started to break down and cry, and that was my only safe place, was the shower, because every time he left me in the shower was when he didn't touch me, he wouldn't hurt me, or he wouldn't rape me.
Despite the harrowing circumstances, Jeanette's spirit remained unbroken, and she continued to look for any opportunity to escape. Back in San Jose, the entire city was on alert, and everyone from police officers to neighbors participating in the search, demonstrating a community united against tragedy. Heather knew the odds were tough, but she was determined to bring Jeanette home safely.
It puts 1,000 more sets of eyes out on the street, and we knew it was extremely important to push the information out to the public, give them a picture of Jeanette, make sure that flyers were flooded throughout the city.
The situation began to weigh heavily on everyone involved the morning after Jeanette's kidnapping. In San Jose, the Tamayo family, still reeling from the events, gathered around Rosalia, who was recovering from the assault. The police, understanding the power of community support, asked some family members to speak publicly, hoping their voices could help bring Jeanette home. On her second day of captivity, Jeanette knew she had to think of a way to defend herself. She spent hours planning her escape, considering every possible move against her captor. During one tense moment, the man looked at Jeanette with a strange expression, and, for the first time since the kidnapping, he smiled at her. This smile filled Jeanette with revulsion. She wanted to fight back, to do anything to hurt him, just as he had hurt her. However, she controlled her emotions and, keeping her wits about her, returned the smile, pretending to be calm and innocent.
I have to have a conversation with him so he gains my trust. So I remember asking him, "Where are you from?" And he kind of just looked at me like, why is she asking me where I'm from? And I kind of looked at him and kind of smiled. And as much as I didn't want to smile, I just wanted to grab him and punch him and run. I didn't. I kind of went into a survival mode.
She then asked him for a glass of water. Surprisingly, he agreed and, for the first time, left her alone in the room as he went downstairs to fetch it. Now by herself, Jeannette quickly began to work on the handcuffs. She had noticed earlier that the lock was mechanical, not requiring a key. Her heart pounded as she fiddled with the lock, hoping she could free herself. While Jeannette was alone and struggling with the handcuffs, her family's voices filled the air back in San Jose. Their heartfelt pleas broadcast across the local news. They shared their pain and desperation, urging anyone with information to come forward. Back in the captor's house, Jeannette's fingers worked tirelessly. Each click of the handcuffs echoed in the silent room, a sound of hope and fear. She knew this might be her only chance to escape. As she twisted and turned the cuffs, trying to unlock them, she kept thinking about her family, about getting back to them, and about how each second mattered.
I remember feeling with my fingers a little button and like a latch. I realized that if I moved the latch one way and pressed that button, the handcuffs would release.
When Jeannette managed to unlock the handcuffs, she knew she had to act fast. She needed to find something useful, something that could save her or help the police if the worst happened. Quickly, she grabbed the man's watch from the nightstand and rushed to the bathroom to get her underwear. She thought that if she left these items together, they might someday help the police connect him to her kidnapping. Despite her fears, Jeannette decided to treat the man as if he were just another person. Surprisingly, this strategy seemed to work to some extent. He relaxed his guard, took off her handcuffs, and even allowed her to move freely around the house. Though she was infuriated and scared, Jeannette didn't let her emotions take over. She stayed calm and even discussed her future plans with him, trying to gain her captor's trust.
My fear turned into courage. And I told myself, I'm a fighter. I'm gonna make it.
While watching TV together, Jeannette saw a program about asthma tests. Seizing the opportunity, she told the man she had asthma and urgently needed her medication. She hoped this might prompt him to take her outside, or at least let his guard down further. Now Jeannette was staying strong, but back in San Jose, her family was falling apart. 3 days had gone by with little progress in the investigation. Detective Randall and her team were pushing hard, but they had nothing concrete. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Jeannette, feeling numb from the ordeal, refused to give in to despair. Her plan to manipulate her captor was her lifeline. She had to keep engaging with him, making him see her as a person, not just a victim. This was her only chance at survival. Every interaction with him was a calculated effort to stay alive and find a way back to her family. Her resolve was clear. She would do whatever it took to escape. Despite all that, Jeannette was still alert and memorizing everything, determined that if she escaped, she would be able to lead the police to her captor. Her focus intensified when an unexpected ring at the doorbell gave her a brief moment alone. Her kidnapper returned with a smirk, placing a pizza box on the floor. On top of the box was a missing person flyer, her own face staring back at her. Before leaving the room, he chillingly told her he would get rid of her that night. As soon as he shut the door, Jeannette sprang into action. She tossed the pizza aside and began to gather all the evidence she could find. She stuffed everything into the pizza box and slid it under the bed, hoping it might be found by the police if she didn't make it. When he returned, the situation turned dire. He grabbed a pillow and began smothering her with it. Struggling for air, Jeannette pushed against the pillow, but he was overpoweringly strong. Just as she felt herself fading, a surge of adrenaline kicked in. With a desperate effort, she managed to slide her face to the side, gasping for a precious breath. Moments later, he removed the pillow and casually asked, "Do you want to take a shower?" After the shower, Jeannette quickly dressed, checking that the evidence she had collected was still secure in her pockets. Then, a loud knock echoed from downstairs. Jeannette's heart leaped. She wanted to scream for help, but before she could make a sound, the kidnapper was upon her, and he clamped her mouth with his hands. Fearful he might try to harm her again, Jeannette forced herself to stay calm, silently hoping the person at the door would sense something was wrong and not leave. As each second ticked by, Janette lay there under the weight of her captor's hands, acutely aware that this could be both her end and her only chance for rescue. Her mind raced as she planned her next move, aware that her survival might depend on what she did next. Janette was terrified as her kidnapper forced her back into the car and handcuffed her again. The car started moving, and she couldn't hold back her tears and screams. As they drove, Janette tried to calm herself, attempting to make sense of the nightmare she was enduring, but she hadn't given up hope. Throughout the ride, which lasted over 30 minutes, she meticulously tried to remember each turn they took, though it was harder to keep track this time. Eventually, the car pulled into the brightly neon-lit parking lot of a liquor store near the highway. As her kidnapper left, Janette seized her moment and ran towards the liquor store, barely believing she had managed to gain enough of his trust to make her escape. Once inside, she was suddenly standing right in front of the cashier, her mind racing with emotions and thoughts. Afraid but determined, Janette first tried to call her mother, but she was too shaken to dial the number properly. The cashier, named Yasin, realized who she was after a brief conversation and immediately called the police.
Use the phone, actually. Okay, here's the phone. When she started dialing the phone, she was panicking, scared. She didn't know how to dial the number.
The San Jose police acted swiftly upon learning of Janette's discovery in East Palo Alto. Detective Randall was filled with relief when he saw Janette safe, but she knew they had to move fast to catch the kidnapper.
Hello, Janette. My name's Heather, and I'm here to help you. And before I really said anything else, she let me know that she had some evidence in her pocket.
Janette, demonstrating incredible presence of mind, pulled out various items from her pockets: toys, her underwear, and the kidnapper's watch, among other things. Amazed by her resourcefulness, the investigators asked if she had anything else that might help. Janette asked for a sheet of paper and drew the house where she had been held, including bits of the address, the exact phone number, and everything else she could remember. With this critical information, Randall immediately coordinated with a tactical team and a canine squad to raid the house. The suspect, David Montiel Cruz, tried to resist arrest and even threatened the officers, prompting them to release the dogs. He was quickly subdued after suffering multiple injuries from the encounter. Inside the house, the police found the pizza box under the bed, filled with the evidence Janette had collected. Thanks to Janette's bravery and quick thinking and the swift action of the police, the district attorney's office was able to file 9 felony charges against Cruz, including burglary, sexual assault, and rape. Ultimately, the conviction and sentence of David Montiel Cruz to over 100 years in prison brought some measure of justice for the horrific crimes he committed. As we close this harrowing chapter of Janette's story, we're reminded of the resilience and courage displayed by a young girl faced with unimaginable circumstances. Janette's quick thinking and her ability to keep her composure under such extreme stress not only led to her escape, but also played a crucial role in bringing her abductor to justice. David Montiel Cruz's conviction and the lengthy sentence handed down to him serve as a testament to the effectiveness of the law enforcement team led by Detective Randall and the community's efforts to protect its members. Janette's story, while deeply unsettling, highlights the strength of the human spirit and the power of collective action. Thank you for joining us in this video. Remember, awareness and vigilance can sometimes be the best tools for preventing such tragedies. Stay safe and take care of each other.